So I missed yesterday. So hello. Had my first really full day back in the office and in my life. And I just didn't choose to sort of make the space to sit and process much other than to really lean into to what's familiar and known and comfortable for me. So what I want to just start today by saying is that there's a challenge sometimes to understand the distinction between when do we lean into that which feels safe and when do we step into that space of walking through hesitation and through fear and stretching. And I believe that it is a moment to moment thing and a moment to moment choice. The video a couple of days ago about hesitation is that we don't need more motivation in our life. We need more courage to be able to recognize that when we hesitate, our brains kick in and tell us to stop or freeze or flight or whatever it is. So fight, flight, or freeze. And so I realized that the last couple of days have been a lot about safety for me. And I had many moments in the last little while articulating and speaking out loud to people. It feels very strange for me to be homeless. And a lot of people said, "You're not homeless." And in fact, I was at a friend's place for a barbecue last night. Before I left, she took me by the hand and walked me downstairs into her house and showed me a beautiful bedroom and said, "This space is your space for if you need it." And I've had many of you reach out and say, "I have this space available." And in fact, last night at the barbecue, they talked about all of the ways in which they would move me around and share me. So whether I was staying in a spare bedroom or in somebody's trailer, and not only did I feel comforted, I felt like I had the ability to be able to feel safe, even though on some level my situation is unstable and insecure. I was thinking about a tenant that I had in my rental property who I had to evict recently, who had 3 little dogs and had been abandoned by her partner, so couldn't afford the rent because he used to pay half. And so I finally was helping her pack up because I knew she didn't have capacity to manage it on her own, and I didn't want her to abandon all her things. And so I said, "Where will you go?" And she said, "I don't have anywhere to go, so I guess I'll live in my car until I figure it out." And I said, "What about your dogs?" And she said, "They'll be with me." And I thought, part of me wanted to rescue her, but I'd been rescuing her for 3 months. She hadn't paid me rent in 3 months. And I have a mortgage on the property, so I was covering her. And I wanted to support her, but yet at the same time I felt a sense of sadness and even a little judgment that how is it that you have set up your entire life where, in a moment of crisis when you need support, you don't have support available. So safety is a thing that is created, I believe, not necessarily something that happens. It's created on the inside and then affected by what you're manifesting and creating on the outside. So I want you just to be mindful to where in your life you make fearful decisions in an effort to be safe, when in reality, safety is like everything else in life. It's just simply a choice. And so also wanted to just say that we talked about the grief cycle last time, and I'll be honest that I hit the anger stage because night before last I had my first opportunity to speak directly to my ex-partner. So I'm going to start getting used to saying that. I keep referring to him as my partner. So I had an opportunity to speak to him. It's the first time since he dropped me off at the airport last Tuesday. And I noticed how incredibly angry I was just there was something very practical I needed to speak to him about when he answered the phone. He answered the phone and said, "Hey, how are you?" And like I was just some random Joe. And I instantly felt triggered. Like, how dare you ask me how I am? I'm broken. I'm falling apart. And it's your fault. So I stepped heavy into victim, which created a very angry response. The rest of the phone call didn't go very well, and culminated in him hanging up on me. And one of the things that I have always said in my relationships, whether it's my children or anyone else, is that please don't ever hang up on me. And it goes back to that piece around having the courage to be able to hang out in the space of completion, so that we don't pick up where we left off. And when someone hangs up, my mom always used to say, what happens if that was the very last conversation that you got to have with somebody? And so that's always stuck with me. So I realized that it didn't feel good to be in that space, but I also honored the energy and what I was feeling, and another opportunity to peel another layer of what's going on with me. And it reminded me of, so in You Can Heal Your Heart, they talk about different types of loss that we experience, and that one type of loss is what they refer to as complicated loss. And complicated loss is where it's complicated by other factors. So it can come when it's a surprise, then it's complicated. When somebody doesn't accept the separation, so they're struggling to accept it as a reality, that can be a complicated loss. An uncomplicated loss is when two people just agree and say, you know what, we're done, and we recognize that we're not supporting each other and this relationship isn't sustainable, so we're out. Much easier to heal from an uncomplicated loss than a complicated loss. And so how to do that when you don't have the ability to affect the other side. And so I've been choosing to see if I can. So mine would be considered a complicated loss, and I'm choosing to move it to uncomplicated from the perspective and point of view of everyone has a right to choose to be in a relationship or not. And so it uncomplicates when I just honor my ex-partner's choice. And it's also been extremely helpful. I had a session today with Karen McMullen, sexlovegenius.com. She's amazing. And I referenced the homeless experience, and she laughed and she said, "Isn't that amazing?" And so I was like, "What do you mean?" And so it was some version of, you have freedom for the first time ever. So my oldest is 30 and my youngest is 22, and they both just moved out recently. And so for the first time in 30 years, I only have to worry about me. And that, it's been a long time. And I spent many of those years parenting, not in relationship. And so when things would take a turn in my life, the first thought was, I got to do everything I can to make sure my kids are safe. So not just my safety, but 3 other people's safety. And for the first time in my life, I don't have that looming over me. And so we did a creative movement session as to, so what wants to birth and come through in the space that's about to open up. And it was fascinating for me, because the reality is that the thing that was frustrating my ex was the amount of time I spent at my work, and the thing that was frustrating me is the amount of time that taking care of our home and taking care of him and taking care of all the things that having a relationship and a home required were consuming, and leaving very little space for me. I had a conversation also this morning with my ex-husband, the father of my kids, and he said, it's a blessing and such a wonderful opportunity for you to take care of you, and gave me some feedback on, how much I give and have never done that. And coming from him, that meant a lot. So I'm choosing to move loss from complicated to uncomplicated. So the other kind of loss that many of you might recognize or have experienced is when you have loss inside of limbo. So it's that piece around when a couple keeps breaking up and getting back together. And I know some of you, if you're watching this, you know that this is a little bit about you, is that, getting back together and then breaking up and getting back together, thinking, I wish we could just fix this or kill it one way or the other, or finish it, and feeling like damned if you do and damned if you don't. And so those kind of separations, as difficult as they are, is one of the things that it's helpful to do, is just to affirm heart, mind, and soul that the separation is going to reveal some helpful information, and that relationship will grow or end in its own time, and when you've learned whatever it is that you need to learn. So taking the opportunity to, when you're in the separation phase, lean into what the lessons and the gifts are. Limbo sucks, of course, and often we don't want to surrender in those moments. And do we never ever really know the outcome that life gives us or what life offers us? And if you can believe that, I'll be fine with or without my relationship, it makes it a lot easier. And so I've decided that, and I even said, I humbly sent a email or a text message today to say, I apologized for my anger. said it felt out of integrity with who I was, and that I would work harder to contain and be mindful to how that came out. So that felt better, and it felt better for me to know that if I'm not the one for him, then someone else is, and so I can get myself out of the way so that he can bring happiness into his life, and that doesn't have, his unhappiness doesn't have to be about me. It can be that his happiness will be better served somewhere else. So last thing I just want to say is that the other kind of loss is what is referred to often as disenfranchised grief. And that's a loss where perhaps other people aren't willing to acknowledge or don't socially recognize that a person is entitled to grieve. So that could be, for example, a gay relationship and somebody in that relationship dies, or when somebody's ex-partner dies and they haven't been together for many years, or you have a miscarriage, or perhaps an abortion, or even sometimes the loss of a pet. I know people that really heavily grieve, me included, when a pet dies. And so disenfranchised grief is another type of grief that requires self-permission to be able to do what you need to do to release and let go. So recognizing all along that we only control three things. And I know you've heard me say this, and I'll say it again: how you think, how you feel, and how you act. So take care and responsibility for that, because those are the choices that you get to make, and the ripple effect will be whatever it's going to be. So thank you. I am now out at the acreage next to my old acreage, which is a bit weird, being that I also had moments of feeling like, wow, I gave all of that up, thinking that I had it forever, and how much I loved that house. And how much I loved my neighbor, but they've gone camping gone camping, and I'm dog sitting for a week. So it feels a bit interesting and ironic that I'm sitting next door to the sanctuary that I gave up for the sanctuary that I just lost. So I'm going to sit with that for a little bit and see where that wants to land. So thank you. Would love to hear your stories about loss and your experiences of loss. So don't forget to leave some comments below. It helps me to read and know how what I'm sharing is affecting or impacting. So thank you. I'll talk to you soon.